Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. I'm super happy to have Ethan Aaron with me today. He's the founder of Portable, and if I might say so, a prominent LinkedIn personality in the data community. So I'm super happy to talk to Ethan today. Hi there, Ethan.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here. Always love chatting about data, especially with good friends like you. So excited for the conversation.
Excellent. So let's go right into it. I'd like to know more about the earlier stages of Portable. What prompted you to create the company? Where did you see a gap in the market of ETL and connector tools? Yeah.
Let me try to figure out where to start. So the reason why we decided to start a company in this space is I used to be the head of data library, and I didn't know Python. I didn't know how to write code. And I started looking around. I was like, wow, there are no code solutions that allow you to copy and paste data from applications into your data warehouse. That seems powerful because it allows people that just know SQL to get data out of applications, centralize and build dashboards. So I was like, cool, there's something there. And I think there's kind of two aspects of Portable in terms of our trajectory of how we think about the world. The early days, we've been doing this now for 4.5 years. The early days, the first 4.5 years, our focus has been on all the connectors that no one else has. Like, as someone who doesn't know Python, if I need to get data out of an application and I can't find a no-code connector for it, I can't get the data out of that application. I could pay someone to write me code, but then I have to figure out how to maintain it, and it's a complete nightmare. So Portable for the last 4.5 years has been focused on that. It's ELT for all the stuff no one else has. We have 1,500 integrations that copy and paste data from applications into data warehouses. In the long term, kind of where is our roadmap? Where is our vision? What is our mission? Whatever people are doing with data, they have to be able to get data out of systems and into a centralized place. Our plan is to build all the integrations and to do so in a cost-effective, efficient manner so that data teams aren't stuck between either a really big, expensive vendor or writing their own custom code because it's the only cost-effective way of doing this. We want to give them a sweet spot in the middle where you don't have to write the code yourself, but you also don't need to be spending $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 to copy and paste your data into your data warehouse. And that's what we want to solve: is how do we make it so business-oriented data folks, the ones that just want to build dashboards and answer questions and actually impact the business, can get all of their data centralized without having to spend a crazy amount of money or write a bunch of custom code.
Interesting. So the buying persona is essentially the business person who just wants to get the data without necessarily relying so much on an IT team or whatever technologies is necessary to get them the set data.
So
that's the angle they go.
So it's not business. It's not people in the business. It's not a marketing team or a product team. We do sell to data teams. But in the data, and I know me and you have talked about the different types of data teams and personas out there. We sell to data teams. And when you talk to enough data people, I talk to a lot of data people, both on LinkedIn, in person, at happy hours, in other situations. Data teams and data professionals tend to fall into one of two camps, in my opinion. They either love technology, they love writing code, deploying Kubernetes, writing custom stuff, or they're like, yeah, I could do all that, or maybe they can't. Like, I can't do that type of stuff. But they want the data so that they can solve business problems. We sell to those people. We sell to data teams, people that do know SQL, that do have a data warehouse or a data lake. But they get motivated every day by what is the highest value thing they can work on inside of the business. The business problems are what really motivate them. We sell to those people more so than the people that look at their data technology and say, oh, wow, that new technology is the thing that motivates me right now. That's not, those data teams tend to be a lot more excited about the new open source trends and the new ways of building things. Not to say one is right or wrong, but we tend to sell to data people that know SQL,
right,
have a data warehouse, have some BI tools, and just want the data they need to solve those problems.
In a super simple way, people are interested more in the rows than the columns. So,
yep.
Right. So
yep.
it's actually what the data means than how it's, modeled and organized and all that. So that's interesting, because then you get the folks that create value, but then you need to scale this to a point where you reach the complexity of a large enterprise. What do you think is similar or different to going to pivoting also to this market as well? Because it has its own, like we, for example, work exclusively with enterprises, and there you have kind of the business people that are a little bit further away from the actual value of the data, and usually an army of technologists that know the intricate details of handling the enterprise scale systems and the on-premise systems and the cloud systems and all that. So in the context of portable, where do you think the similarities and differences are, and what are your plans going forward?
Totally. Right now, we work with some enterprises. It is not our focus. Our focus is on large mid-market companies down through startups and mid-sized brands and e-commerce companies, et cetera. And the reason there is not because we can't solve problems for enterprise. We definitely can. But our approach has been, we want to rapidly innovate on the tooling and technology and the product that we're building, and focus all of our efforts on that, and not as much of our efforts on long procurement cycles, long sales cycles, managing stakeholders. The first customer we actually had, I went through a 9-month-long enterprise sales cycle, and it was fascinating. I loved it. Like you see a bunch of different personas, et cetera. But for us, kind of coming out of that, we made a decision and a distinction early on in our company that we want to focus on being a fully self-service product that is able to get data out of thousands of systems and centralize it. And I give it another probably 12 months for us to be in a very, very strong spot when it comes to being able to pull data from all applications and some other data sources like databases into your data warehouse or data lake. And then we'll kind of flip a switch and say, okay, great. And now how do we get really great at navigating stakeholders, going through procurement processes, et cetera? But as a lean team, we kind of had to make a decision of where we want to invest our time. And for us, for now, we've drawn a pretty hard line of saying we won't go through extensive procurement cycles. We won't go through extensive like sales cycles where you can find the champion, then go make a financial case to X or Y. And so it's if you have it like so I think that's one of the other big distinctions is you've got like the tech focused data people and the business focused data people at smaller companies, and they tend to split into either like cloud based tools or open source tools. And then inside of bigger enterprises, they have to use some combination of all of the above, because if but you also need to make a decision that you sell to enterprise companies because you have to cater to their procurement processes and sales cycles. And I think if you accidentally end up in those sales cycles or procurement processes and you don't know what you're signing up for, you need to know that that's what you're doing at that point in time. And I give it a year until that's where we're focusing our time. How about you? How have you found the differences? And I know you sell to enterprise, kind of. Right. How do you think about the differences?
Well, I think it's fascinating because a sales cycle of only 9 months sounds like a breath of fresh air, right? It's you have to adapt to a sales cycle where people, especially startups, it goes beyond 12 months and they fall off a cliff, right? With it's a data integration product. It's called Monga. Is that at the enterprises, what they're also missing is the ability to connect modern platforms to legacy systems, where you need the connectivity suite that will talk to the legacy systems and quickly adapt to them, by also bringing also industry formats, like for example, for payments, Swift and all sorts of payments. We now are working on supporting the American formats and also a particular insurance interface peculiarities. So you can really plug a relatively, different enterprise landscape to a very modern, almost consumer quality, like software as a service company, and allow them to integrate in a way that they really haven't before. Because enterprise software is usually ugly, slow, and especially for pure technology people come and work to enterprise software, they're like, oh my God, we didn't know it was so bad. That's how bad it is. Whereas working for a product, nice UI, feedback from customers, great experience. You're building something, you can see this is more like the back end of the meal of the whatever. And so what we're also looking to do is, and doing more, is also partnering with SaaS companies to integrate their solution into the enterprise, because this is what we're historically good at, grown out of services for the enterprise. Whereas interesting thing is, for you, you're growing out of a product and you're thinking of going to the enterprises to do services. With us, it was kind of the other way around. And we're still hoping to reach one point in time where we would sell to smaller customers, just because the use case would be so generic to also work for them. So I think one has to kind of always look what they're good at and how the market situation is. But the enterprise is a totally different jungle than let's say pure technology facing teams that can immediately compare your product with, let's say, what's open source, with, let's say, what's frontier, with what the best companies can do. And the beautiful thing about software I found is that there's a lot of niches out there. If you're really cognizant of what you're good at and what you're less good at, that you can carve out. Since we're seeing that the data space is very crowded, right? With ETL integration, there's a ton of tools.
Yep. It's really interesting, though, to your point of enterprise data problems, especially data integration problems, are very different. It's similar, but very different in the sense of, like, yes, you might have to go deploy something on-prem to be able to get the data out, to then pull it and put it where you place it. That's a very different type of problem than just what a lot of the larger ELT tools do, which is copy and paste your Postgres data into your data warehouse, which is different than what we've done for the last 4.5 years, which is get data from API-based data sources into a data warehouse or data lake. And it's really interesting because everyone thinks everyone competes with each other, whereas they, in a lot of respects, they don't. It looks like everyone does, which makes it an absolute nightmare for anyone trying to evaluate integration solutions, because they're like, everyone says they do everything, and very few people are willing to just say, I don't do that. We have a very clear distinction of what we do and what we don't. And if we do not solve someone's problem, like as our product, I will introduce them to other products and services, because I know we're not going to solve the problem. And I know there are people that are better at other types of integration problems than we are. But it's I wish it was clearer. I wish it was simpler to just say, hey, if you need this system, here are your options. If you need this system, here are your options. But it's not even a system thing. Like I saw someone recently post on LinkedIn about getting their MySQL data into their data warehouse, which you would think would be a pretty straightforward change data capture use case. They didn't have things enabled to actually do change data capture. So that was one consideration. They had other security in place around their MySQL environment that made it even more complex. Each of those decisions wipes out an entire suite of vendors from being able to help them. And depending on how far you go down the rabbit hole of how you configured MySQL, it might be a services problem. Like, you might not be able to find a product to help with that. You might need services as your solution. And the idea of being able to, like, that it's that complicated it's a really fascinating market to try and help people in, because it can be simple, but it can also be really, really wildly complicated and complex.
Absolutely. And if you look at, change data capture, I mean, yes, there are some open source solutions out there, but very quickly you find out they don't do Oracle. They don't do all the things that you need them to do in their space. And then people would fall back into, I mean, some of my clients will recognize that, so into legacy solutions, to solve modern problems, which is also sometimes, well, it's valid. They don't have any other options, right? And so it seems like the space is crowded, but when I actually drill down into it, and then immediately it's pretty clear, well, there aren't that many solutions that really solve such an enterprise case with all the, security and all the stuff needed to do this the proper way. And that's the one part. And the other part is what you mentioned, is going out from a database to a data warehouse, or from an API to a data warehouse. But then all these use cases are converging, where they're saying, we need to do that. Plus we have to have the ability to have, like, I don't know, pull directly from the source. And we have, like, in some cases, up to 2,000 transactions per second, right? Yep. So can you guys do that? And then all of a sudden it's a completely different animal than just pulling data. So that's the cool thing about the data landscape. And then the question becomes, how do you actually explain this to, to stakeholders, to potential clients? that, connector is not a connector. That's like
Yeah.
the name is the same, but, there's a huge variance. And that's why I continue to be optimistic around the market. I think there's enough room to grow these solutions and the kind of augment the open source world in a meaningful way. I was thinking of doing open source, but then I figured out after long discussions that open source would be a way where it'd just be more costly. Actually, it wouldn't be cheaper at all, and it wouldn't help anyone really. So it wouldn't have like this open source thought. So there you have that. So it's also very difficult in this open source space to even create something or put something out and say, okay, how about this open sourcing it? And I see more and more startups not going the open source route. Maybe that's just a fad. But it's interesting how this develops.
Yeah, I think the norm. I think at least for the next 5 years. I think 5 years is. It might be longer, to be honest with you. I think data professionals and data teams need to realize that you're not going to find one solution for all of your data integration needs. It's not going to happen. In the next 5 years, that company will not exist. I want it to be portable. 5 years, like we've already been going for 4.5 years, and we're really great at moving data from APIs and data warehouses. We have not moved a byte of data from a database into a data warehouse. We have not touched files as data sources. We have not touched webhooks as data sources, let alone all the on-prem stuff that you're talking about and the complex configuration around that, or Oracle or SAP. I think you have to get comfortable moving quickly, or whatever your speed is, to use maybe a service provider for some of the on-prem stuff, maybe open source for some of the big things, maybe a native connector from a data lake or data warehouse for certain things, and maybe another tool for niche applications. And I think that's where data teams need to be adding value, is the speed at which they can stand up, procure, de-risk their data stack by using different solutions. I think a lot of data teams believe that there's one, that whether they use open source or a big ELT tool or someone else or a service provider, that one solution is going to solve all of their problems. And then they try and pigeonhole everything through an open source framework, and it's not going to work. Like, you're going to waste an unbelievable amount of money on headcount trying to do that. Or they go entirely through a big ELT tool where now you're writing custom code like open source, but now you're paying a bill for every record of data moved through the cloud provider. And you still have to maintain it yourself. So like, I think that is a realization that, having now been in this market for almost 10 years, specifically using ELT tools and then building an ELT tool, I give it another 5 years, and I don't even know, because my guess is in the next 5 years, a number of the existing tools that are pretty far along solving these problems will get acquired or shut down because of the market. And when that happens, we start over, and the clock starts ticking another 10 years until we actually have a solution for all of your integration needs in one place. I give it at least 5 years. I'm kind of curious to your take. Do you think that's a reasonable time frame? Do you think we'll ever get there?
I think we'll be closer, but I do agree with you that the time frame is much longer. People seem to think, oh, with AI and this and so many, in fact, integration is a huge mess. And you see the modernized, like, let's take a step back. The digitization wave, especially in Europe, for the past couple of years, we talk about digitalization. Now, the current wave of AI that we're seeing is largely, the hype is largely because the digitization hasn't been finished. Meaning, we still run on old school systems that require a ton of complex expertise to run for things that, if you were to build them at a university project or at a startup, would be fairly simple to create. And still, they spend millions on keeping entire teams just to keep one or two systems alive, which for you think, for what use case? To just, I don't know, some data quality reporting. Why'd you guys do that? Well, because of this and that and the other. And so, but it's a legacy that is difficult to remove. And you see this across the board for various use cases, meaning until we reach a point where integration is so simple that you have these systems that talk to each other, almost kind of like, okay, plugging USB and then it's good. We're a long way from that. I think long way from that. And especially in the enterprise space, long way from that. But I wanted to ask you something else, since you mentioned data teams. If you, if you see the, kind of the opinions going around on LinkedIn, especially in a kind of a down market situation, I was actually surprised your take on data teams is very similar to what I have seen in the real world to be true, but not a lot of consultants or consulting companies talk about that. They downplay this, which is, what do you need data teams for? What is the reason for them to exist? And a lot of enterprises should look into this on a zero-based approach. They tend to keep the old school, teams that have been doing SQL with, let's say, SQL Server or Oracle for 20 years to also do the new data engineering stuff, which would require a totally different way of thinking, totally different tooling that you'd use.
Yep.
And so what do you think are the kind of the main things to consider for creating and running a data teams from the point of the enterprise?
So it's really interesting because I do think, especially enterprise companies, let alone most companies, can get value from having data professionals inside of their organization. But there is a very big distinction between, do you have someone that knows SQL or how to stand up a data stack on your marketing team? Or do you carve out a data team that lives on its own and has its own mandate to work across marketing, sales, product, HR? That should be a proactive decision by the enterprise or by a company, that they believe this is a team and a business unit and not a skill that marketers should have and a skill that HR teams should have. I think a lot of companies passively make these decisions. They passively say, we need to have a data team because everyone else has a data team, or we've had one for 10 years. And now you've got this data team that stands on its own, and they passively give work to the data team. They passively say, hey, can you work on this ticket? Like, the marketing team needs this. Hey, can you work on this ticket? The HR team needs this. And no one ever asks the question, why does this data team exist?
Can I pause you for a moment here? Because this is super interesting. One reason why I think that is, and I don't know if you agree, is because, and I think I'll put it out bluntly, the lack of understanding of some aspects of management about how data in the company is created and utilized. Like, for example, they'll understand if they were to invest in a warehouse, of why it's important to have a good warehouse and logistics, and then all of your processes and business departments and units can work great together. But they have a very difficult time understanding why to invest in certain data warehouse, let's call it for like, or data lakes or whatever, data platform tooling, to the point where this sits really high up with management, and they can then say data is not something you are, data is something you do. Do you think there's something to this?
I do think most data, I don't think they should be as big as they were a couple of years ago, but I do think most companies should have a data team. The thing that scares me is if you go to someone and say, why did you build a physical warehouse to store your goods before you ship them off to smaller warehouses to get them delivered to the end customers? They're going to say, because if we don't do that, we have to ship it all off to these small warehouses and pay 10x premiums to store stuff there, or buy inventory at the last minute for premiums. They know the difference. They know that the problem they're solving is it costs more if you do the little warehouses than if you have a big centralized warehouse. I don't think data teams or the people that hire data teams know the problem that they are, like, they don't have a clear image of, when we centralize the data in the data warehouse, it's so much better than the alternative, and put the two side by side. Very few data, like, I do know, I believe consultants are very good at this. And then I probably have, there's probably a handful to 10 people in the data world. I know that sounds absolutely insane given how many people work in data. A handful to 10 people in the data world where I know, like, if you talk to the head of data at one of those companies, they have very, very clear business priorities, that they know how bad it is without them, and they know how good it is with them. And so does their leadership team. And everyone is on the exact same page as to why they exist. Most 99% of data teams cannot paint that picture. They cannot say, Without us, it looks like this. With us, it looks like this. This is why we exist. It's to keep us away from that chaos that existed before. I think a lot of data teams exist because they exist. Like they're just there saying we centralize the data and we build the things because other companies do that. And I don't think that's an acceptable answer. I don't think that's an acceptable answer for your employees on the data team. They should have a better answer of why do they exist. It's not an acceptable answer for the head of data to say, we exist because we need to centralize data. That's not the answer. You can't use that as why your data team exists. And it should not be an acceptable answer to the CEO or the CTO or the CFO that spends the money to fund that data team. They should be asking for something better. They should be asking for, okay, great. I might not know, like if you're the CEO and you have a 10-person data team or a 5-person data team, or you're an enterprise and you have a 50-person data team, if the data team says that their mandate is centralize the data and you're spending $10 million a year on centralizing the data, how does that impact your business? Like why, like centralize the data to streamline warehouse operations as a commerce brand? Okay, now I start to see why you're spending that money. Like, but is it really a $20 million a year problem? Like if it is, great. Now you have the story. Now we're spending $20 million on centralizing data to streamline our shipping and logistics, because if we don't, it's going to cost us $40 million a year. Now now everyone understands why you've hired a team of people to centralize data and centralize infrastructure around it. A lot of teams just skip that step. They skip the step of why do we exist and why, like, what is the alternative if we don't?
I think this is a super insightful opinion, and I'm super happy that you kind of represent this on LinkedIn, since it's not really certainly the most popular one among data professionals, but a correct one, because that implies that everything you do your data teams are part of the value creation, and then the problem with the executives not understanding that is why it's so different from traditional software development. Because if I'm just running a business and then I need an app for whatever customer facing reason or whatever, I know that the people that create the app. I can see if it's a good app or a bad app. I know how much it costs. I can even maybe have like a rough idea about the technologies used. But if I'm to really understand how my business operates in a way, what data is produced from upstream to downstream, from reporting to operations to everything, then I'm in a much better way to understand the investment case in data teams, the investment case in data platforms. And that seems to me that we get another shot of that while this AI hype is still ongoing, but then it will die out again, right? Because it comes in cycles. That were, first interested in machine learning, that they were prior to that in maybe there was a hot topic was data management, and prior to that it was big data. So there's always, every few years we get some of those moments where this gets onto the C-level agenda, but it just seems to me that it never really entertains the top management to the point where most of them would really understand it. I mean, there's, especially on the CFO side, you can see that there are people that really understand that, but it's not nearly as ubiquitous as you might think. That's also my opinion.
I think there's a lot of data teams that are riding the wave of AI right now as their justification to exist. Like 5 years ago, 3 years ago, the data team grew from 1 person to 3 people to 10 people. I'm thinking more of like 1,000-person company. Went from 1 person to 3 people to 5 people to 30 people. Then everyone realized they hired too many data people. Now the data team went back to 5 people. And those 5 people are now looking, saying, how do we justify the data team existence? And the flashy, new, easy way of doing it is to say they work on AI. And you can't do AI without the data team. And again, why do you have an AI team? I understand everyone has to right now. They all think that everyone else is doing it, so you can't miss out. But it's like, and I do believe AI will transform a lot of businesses. But I think you have to be asking the exact same question of AI, which is, are you building an AI team for the sake of building an AI team and exploring technologies? Or are you using AI to streamline customer support because customer support costs your company $50 million a year? And if you can shave off a tenth of the requests that come in, you can create a better customer experience and save $10 million or $5 million. Okay, that justifies your 5-person data team headcount working on that problem. Like, I think we're seeing the same thing happen in AI right now. And
You're so correct.
people, yeah.
You're so correct. Absolutely. And you know why? There was, I don't know if you see the recent report by Goldman Sachs, which just blew everyone out of the water in terms of, I think, the sheer level of skepticism that the overall investments in AI will not pan out, for a very simple reason that, there are trillions invested in this technology, which still and not anytime soon will be solving $1 trillion problem overall, and then down onto the company level. I mean, this is obviously butchering the entire 40, 50 something page report, but it was certainly against pretty much every marketing bullet point by most of the AI firms out there in terms of reality check. And here's where you're right about the data teams relabeling themselves to AI teams. I think that would be a disservice to them, because you could cancel a few AI initiatives where the ROI doesn't pan out. But are you willing to stick your head out for the entire data team for this? Probably not. So it will be a lot of reality checks very soon for a lot of companies that have drank their own Kool-Aid on AI all too much. Obviously, there's huge benefits for using it correctly, but most of them are the boring use cases, the enterprise use cases in the mid office, in the back office that no one cares about, but actually cost the money, rather than the flashy, we'll post a LinkedIn post about this cool use case. But I see this as a risk for data teams, not only for data teams, but also for data platforms. I remember discussing with you a couple of months ago around the changes at Snowflake. And I think you were a bit more skeptical than I was at the time. Has your opinion changed? And I'll just as a background for the listeners, I'm still very bullish on both Snowflake and Databricks, but it seems to me that Snowflake invested all too much in the AI promise, whereas enterprises really want to solve data management stuff first. And at the same time, it seems to me that Databricks was known for the machine learning, for the AI, for this more technical aspect of things. But now that the AI hype went up, and they came out with the more mundane data warehousing functionality and enabling more broader use cases, then they were kind of riding both waves. And, both vendors are really, really great. But has your opinion changed in the past, let's say, 3 to 6 months on where the data platforms are going?
So there's some undercurrents. So a couple of things. One, we integrate with both. So we integrate with Snowflake directly, and then because we've been hearing more and more demand for Databricks, and talking to more and more people in the Databricks world, we just added S3 as a destination. So we can now get Parquet files delivered to S3, which is a great way for people to start using Databricks with Portable. So we support both. A lot of our customers today are on Databricks. They're on Snowflake. I expect a lot to be on Databricks in the near term. But what are some of the things that are going on in the world? Historically, they sold to different people. Similar to the data integration world, data warehousing, data lake solutions tend to sell to different use cases. Snowflake, primarily, it's a gross generalization, was selling to analytics people that don't know Python, people that do not know how to run a machine learning model or any of that type of stuff. They are people that want a simple way to tap into an ecosystem around Snowflake, put data into Snowflake, and build dashboards and reporting, and maybe automate some workflows on the side out of that data. That's who they were selling to. Databricks was selling to a different part of the market. They were selling to people that, if you say the word Parquet, 90% of people that use Databricks know what that means. If you say the word Parquet to people on Snowflake, I think 90% of the people don't know what that means. They've never seen a Parquet file in their life. And so they were selling to different people. You've got data scientists, machine learning engineers that were on Databricks. And you'd have very few, I would probably say 5% of people on Databricks using it to just build reports and insights, like traditional business intelligence use cases, the stuff that Snowflake and BigQuery tend to do really well for. And now what's happened is Snowflake's gone public. Databricks probably going to go public at some point in the near term. And they both need a bigger and bigger market to go after. And then, so they were already starting to encroach on each other's space Databricks trying to make it easier for people to just run SQL statements and build dashboards. Snowflake trying to expand out into some of the stuff, kind of the data lakehouse architecture, and go into some of these other use cases. And then out of nowhere, not out of nowhere, but out of nowhere, AI just got dropped on everyone. And now it's okay, how do these two companies compete with each other? I think they both said, we do AI. And I think my personal take is the we do AI pitch aligns very well with the people already using Databricks. Like the people that are on Databricks are comfortable training models and using models and all that, like, because they tend to be more machine learning, data science, engineering type personas. Snowflake, and looking at this, and like if you went to Snowflake Summit, you saw every single session was around AI. Like the word AI was plastered everywhere in this place. You could find the word AI more than you could find a cup of coffee in Snowflake Summit. And I think it makes for a really interesting competitive dynamic, because my personal take, Databricks in the immediate term is better positioned to go after the AI market. And I think part of the problem with Snowflake dropping everything to go all in on AI is it opens up all of the data analysts and the analytics engineers and the traditional business intelligence developers that looked at Snowflake and said, they are built for me. Like what Snowflake is doing resonates with me. I think a lot of the people using Snowflake are now looking around being like, who is Snowflake marketing to? Like I'm not going to be able to do this machine learning model stuff that Snowflake's pitching to me, but like I'm spending a bunch of money on Snowflake. Who are they selling to now? Because it doesn't appear to be me. And then Databricks is coming along being like, hey, we're actually trying to make it easier for BI people to transition over to Databricks. So it's this really interesting thing of, I think if Snowflake stayed focused on analysts and BI developers and just traditional people that want a self-service ecosystem of tools to build reporting and insights, I think they could continue to own that market. But I think they have jumped pretty heavily onto the AI. Even their CEO, his background, everything they pitched.
Huge Campbell. Yeah. Maybe it's time will tell, but it seems abandoning their core product, even in terms of messaging, is an absolute disservice because of the points you just mentioned. And on the other hand, you used to have like the companies, you had the traditional BI data warehousing team working with your Oracle, like way before. And then when big data and Hadoop came along, it wasn't the same team that did Java MapReduce, right? It's basically a more software oriented, more data sciencey team that started doing it. They weren't super successful. We know where Hadoop's at right now, but it sort of exploded and then went died like nothing else. Partly because of the rise of Snowflake and the cloud data warehousing alternatives like BigQuery and Redshift and etc. But then it seems to me that your traditional SQL writing person and BA analytics kind of SQL jobs writing person would have gone to Snowflake. But then now, since everyone's saying, okay, but AI, and then Databricks saying, well, we could do your BI cases as well. It seems like it's like skipping, fiber optic and going into start directly from dial-up internet, right? It feels like, so skipping just a complete, a complete technology, the serverless database as such, and going into Lacehouse architecture that could do both. And so it'd be interesting to see how this dynamic continues and whether either of them gets acquired by one of the big three hyperscalers, just because it's out there, right? Just because it's if you're a $3 trillion company and it's like, oh, what's their valuation of these guys? 40 billion now. We'll get both. It doesn't matter.
I kind of my long-term take on this is, underlying technology aside, which you can't ignore, but underlying technology aside, data analysts kind of remind me of Excel people. I used to be the Excel person when I worked at Goldman, where it's like you live and breathe VLOOKUPs and index max functions. And a lot of people believed that, and still believe that Excel is going to die and those people are going to go away. There are more Excel people than there are data analysts. I kind of view the traditional BI developers, the people and the analysts, the ones that know SQL, and as long as data is in some sort of tabular format, can actually like query it and build reporting. I don't think they're going anywhere. I think you're still going to need to answer basic questions in a way that is not generated by AI, because SQL can get complex, and you can't have the wrong join in your financial statements. It just doesn't work like that. So like you're still going to need those people to answer questions. And then a subset of that, which is extremely valuable, but a different subset of the market, a new part of the market, is whether it's prompt engineers or model development, like everything around ML, data science, etc. That I think the idea of giving up on the analytics use cases or not continuing to focus on that, I think there's a big opportunity there. And it's the most interesting part is if Snowflake's positioning right now is going to look a lot more heavily towards the AI micro segment of people, and Databricks is also kind of in that world, and Google, Amazon, and Microsoft don't really care about the person they sell to. So like none of them are positioning their product specific to analysts. They all are just selling infrastructure, and people buy it because they're on one of the clouds. I don't think there's really anyone in the market that's big enough to be notable. Sorry to anyone else that is saying, I just want to win the analytics use case. I can't point you to that person anymore. They used to be Snowflake, and they used to win.
I have a theory about this. And disclaimer, this is not an investment advice. This is just entertainment, okay? For informational purposes only. But I think Microsoft's case fits best out of everyone, because and one of the things that I saw early on is how Power BI is absolutely going to capture this market, despite the fact that absolutely no one except the CIOs trying to standardize and CFOs looking at the cost liked it. And now everyone's doing Power BI, and all these other, BI tools, they used to be very cool. Well, they're fighting an uphill battle against the pre-integrated Power BI that integrates with your teams, with your everything. And so you see with Fabric opening up more to Snowflake, they're kind of saying, we'll see how you guys do. We'll see how it goes. But if anyone has a case to, because this analyst that you're talking about, the world runs on Excel. The people that can have decisions, and what you mentioned with writing, just using prompting to create SQL. The English language is way more complicated than SQL. It's much easier to write a complex SQL statement than to describe properly in English what you want the AI to do to create a SQL statement for you.
Yeah.
In my opinion. So the analyst role is only like, these guys are like, it is the best time in the world right now to be a good analyst, because you have all the tools at hand to do integrations, to do analysis, to do everything. And the only thing you have to do is to actually do the work, right? To do the analysis. Yeah. So I think you're fully right on this.
And tie it back to business value. If you could just figure out business problems to solve, be an analyst, use the tools, and get it done, you are in short supply right now and in demand when it comes to being able to add value to companies.
Yeah, and there's so much that should change there, because in the enterprises, and you see this across the board, take, I don't know, European banks, insurance companies, large enterprises. It's still the case where, someone is, we need to build, I don't know, a couple of columns to that pipeline. It's like, you need a ticket, you need this, you need that, and then you can release it in 3-4 weeks. This is ridiculous. But what you had in 2 columns and you guys need 3 weeks? Are you crazy? Yep. This is like 10 minutes work. And so there's a lot of consolidation, a lot of improvement there. And if you stick with the analysis role and just be good at the business with it, by understanding the tooling, I think that's a great advice for everyone trying to. In fact, I think we're even arguing with my friends from the management consulting industry, and saying, well, you guys are just, you're just gonna, the profession is going to. If they're listening to this, I don't mean it really, but more or less within 5 to 10 years, it's going to be a data analyst with a financial domain know-how. Okay, you're going to have to be so good at pulling together data, testing different scenarios, deriving insights immediately, where you don't have the luxury of, I will define this, then a technical team will do this for me, or go through a super complex self-service platform that almost works for something. So I think we're going to see huge developments, and who else better than Microsoft to to bring more and more automation and more kind of out of the box solutions, tools for analysts to use. Yeah. And we'll see. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we both agree that both Databricks and Snowflake are great. So that's really just competing in the very high level. Who is really world champion,
and they're independent.
Second.
Like even someone like Microsoft, though. I think Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. Sure, like Google, they have Google Sheets and Google Drive. Like they're already tied into the other half of the world. It's like you're either on Excel or you're on Google Sheets. Those are the two options. So they're both really well positioned. But I think Snowflake and Databricks are uniquely positioned because they aren't associated with a big cloud. And a lot of companies view buying in, I don't like it's interesting. I don't think this is how the world should work. But if someone's a Google Cloud company, they will not buy a Microsoft product, which is crazy because they'll go buy a bunch of other products from other random companies, but they won't buy a individual Microsoft product. And I think it's the same way the other way around, where a lot of companies that are on AWS won't buy a Microsoft product, or they won't evaluate a GCP product. And that's another thing that's just semi-wild to me, because they will buy Snowflake, and they'll buy Snowflake and Databricks before they consider buying anything from one of the other cloud providers. Whereas I think, I think your point about, is Microsoft well positioned for this, or is GCP, my take, GCP is also well positioned for this. I think they are also not stuck, but it's tough for them to truly go to market with a thing that and decouple it from the fact that you need to become a GCP shop or a Microsoft shop. I think when Microsoft tries to sell things, they go in and instead of being able to say, hey, just use Power BI on its own, or use or use Fabric on its own, they have to go in and say, hey, use Fabric, and then by the way, we want to rip out Google Sheets and put in Microsoft, or like, hey, actually, we want to rip out all of your cloud. So like, I think the big cloud providers are not good at creating a modular thing and trying to sell it. Like if they effectively spun out Power BI into its own company and said, this is not part of Fabric, like, this is not part of anything else, it's just going to be a visualization tool that's agnostic of the cloud provider, like they could win everything. They already are winning most of the stuff. It's like, I think the fact that things inside of Microsoft, Amazon, GCP are so coupled with you need to buy it all gives someone like Snowflake and Databricks a really big opportunity to sell anywhere. And I think they need to be really, really specific about how they actually, who they're selling to and why.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And it's about, if you look historically, you know, when this whole cloud thing started, you know, it was Amazon and then Google, right? Microsoft was very uncool back then. But then they figured out what they're good at, and they were good at capturing the enterprise like no one else was capturing the enterprise. You saw in Europe, they were the ones giving out the most enterprisey contracts, going all the way aligned with regulators and everyone else, going out of their way to support the enterprises to not feel reluctant to move their workloads there. Whereas, you know, Amazon and Google were both kind of, yeah, we don't care about that. We're the startups, our way or the highway. You know, they weren't really willing to work all that much, which obviously changed. Now we see, for example, that, you know, arguably Google is going super, super focused about getting the enterprise deals and trying to outcompete Microsoft, and Amazon trying to do both. So I think this competition is great, and you really can't go wrong with either of the three. So if someone has an advantage in a certain segment, you see in a couple of months, and basically what you see happening in the market, there others are already catching up. So it's really, really fast moving, and then out of this whole compute and infrastructure market, something like a database layer seems so minuscule, right? For them, like you see with Microsoft with the SQL data warehouse and what was Synapse and all that kind of stuff. Well, they keep renaming it, they keep changing it. Well, you can't have like a department compete with like a company that's best in class, or two of the companies that are best in class. And so it's a really interesting dynamic to follow. But
that's it.
We'll see. Yeah. So looking at the time, and before we wrap this up, I think just wanted to ask you if there's some events, or I mean, Ethan is known, for those of you that it isn't obvious, is one of the most prominent organizers of data happy hours worldwide. I think with worldwide following, certainly the best site events at Snowflake and Databricks type of conferences. But is there something else that you want to share with the listeners? What's happening in the next weeks, months?
If you're ever in New York, I host low-key data happy hours. We have anywhere from 50 to 150 people show up every month. No sponsors, no speakers, buy your own drinks. And then the other part that's really interesting is people are starting low-key data happy hours around the world. LA, San Diego, Vancouver, Toronto, London, all over the place. And if you are in a city somewhere, either check out to see if there is something in your city. And if not, it is unbelievably easy to just start getting data people together once a month, once every couple months, and it costs you nothing. So if you ever are looking around just being like, hey, I wish I could hang out with more data people, you definitely can. I'm happy to help. Feel free to ping me on LinkedIn and say, hey, I want to get a happy hour started in my town or city. And I would love to help, just because one day, hopefully I'll travel to your city and be able to hang out, but it's just fun. It's so great to hear the different conversations and topics and things that people are talking about all over the world, because it's a pretty small data world out there.
It is a small data world out there, and you're certainly more than welcome to join us here in Vienna, Austria, when you get the chance. So that'll be great. Yeah,
I will absolutely do it.
Ethan, thanks so much for your time. It was wonderful to chat as always, and some super insightful inputs from your side. And we'll be in touch. And thanks so much, and bye, everybody.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure.